They say legends fade, but some don't die. They ride across dust, lawless borders, and silence, wide as the sky. One man, 2,000 arrests, 14 kills. No press, no pause, no panic. Just the job. Done right. Bass Reeves wasn't a hero. He was something harder. A lawman who walked the line before most men admitted the line even existed. He didn't preach. He practiced. Didn't boast. He built. And in the middle of the American frontier, where justice was often just a whisper, he made it thunder. Call me Gage. Cole Braddock. If you're filing it with Central. I'm the voice out of time, patching through on WGAI 13. My beat? History's unsung. The forgotten and the forged. Tonight we head west. Not the Hollywood West. Not Spurs and stage light West. The real one. Dust-choked. Law-starved. Raw. See, after Marcus. After Batman. I needed clarity. Something clean. Something that didn't need philosophy books to prove its worth. In the archives, I found a signal that cut through the fog. A file buried deep. Stamped. Reeves, Bass. Born a slave. Made a marshal, wrote his legacy in boot tracks and spent casings. Every record, every witness, every echo, said the same thing. He didn't flinch, he didn't fold, he didn't break. That's not legend. That's Stoicism, written in dust and blood. So, saddle up. This isn't a campfire story. It's a transmission. A field report on what discipline looks like when there's no backup coming, and the nearest law is 1,000 miles behind you. If this cuts through the static, if something about a man who stood alone resonates with your own watch, lock onto the signal. Share the frequency. Send it to whoever's holding their own line when the world goes dark. This isn't entertainment. This is proof. Proof that virtue doesn't need an audience and discipline, doesn't require a diploma. You want more? Signal boost. Mark the coordinates. Drop a beacon in the void. We're not just preserving stories here. We're preserving standards. Born in 1838. Arkansas Territory. Crawford County, to be exact. Property before he was ever a person. Listed in the ledger books between livestock and farming equipment. Taught the laws of silence and survival before he could read a single one of the books he'd later carry in his saddlebags. His owner was Colonel George Reeves. Confederate. Cruel. The kind of man who saw people as tools and tools as disposable. Bass Reeves grew up big. 6'2", powerful hands, quick mind. But size was dangerous for a slave. Made you a threat, made you a target. The Civil War came in 1861. Bass Reeves was 23, old enough to understand what freedom meant, young enough to take the risk. The story goes, he was playing poker with his owner's son. Argument broke out. Bass Reeves knocked the boy unconscious and ran. Whether that's truth or legend doesn't matter. What matters is what came next. He crossed into Indian Territory, what's now Oklahoma, disappeared into the wild like smoke. For years, he lived among the Cherokee and Creek nations, learned their languages, not just words, customs, protocols, the kind of knowledge that keeps you alive when you're operating in hostile territory. That wasn't retreat. That was reconnaissance. He learned to track, to hunt, to read sign like a book, skills that would make him the most effective lawman in the most lawless place in America. When the war ended in 1865, Bass Reeves didn't seek revenge, didn't hunt down his former owners, didn't burn what he'd left behind. He sought order. Judge Isaac Parker was appointed to the Western District of Arkansas in 1875. His jurisdiction? 74,000 square miles of Indian Territory, a place where outlaws went to disappear, where law was whatever you could enforce with your own gun. Called Parker the hanging judge. In 21 years, he sentenced 160 men to death, executed 79 of them. He needed deputies who could bring in the living instead of just the dead. He needed Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves couldn't read or write. Didn't matter. When a warrant was read to him, he memorized every detail. Name, crime, last known location, physical description, word for word. Never made a mistake. He carried a Bible and 2 Colt 45s, rode a white stallion he could whistle up from miles away, or a black hat that became his signature across the territory. But the real weapon was his mind. He worked alone. Had to. In Indian Territory, a black deputy marshal was a walking target. White outlaws hated him for the badge. Some Native Americans distrusted him for the government he represented. Some black fugitives felt betrayed when he brought them in. So he learned to be invisible, to disappear, to become whoever he needed to be to get the job done. He posed as a drifter, a cowboy, a preacher. Once he dressed as a beggar and sat outside a church for hours, waiting for his target to emerge. The outlaw walked right past him. Bass Reeves followed him home and made the arrest. Another time, he tracked 3 murderers for days through rough country. When he found their camp, he waited, watched, learned their routines. Then he walked in during breakfast, both guns drawn, and arrested all 3 without firing a shot. That's tactical patience. That's discipline under pressure. He brought in Belle Starr, the bandit queen herself. She respected him enough to surrender without a fight. He arrested the Brunter brothers, Cherokee Bill. Dozens of killers who'd never been taken alive. The case that defined him? His own son, Benjamin Reeves, Bass Reeves's boy, wanted for murder. The warrant came down like any other. Judge Parker read it. Bass Reeves listened, memorized every word. He could have torn it up, could have warned his son to run, could have let another deputy handle it. Instead, he saddled his horse and rode out. Found Benjamin 2 weeks later, made the arrest, brought him in, his own blood. At the trial, Bass Reeves sat in the back, watched his son get sentenced to life in prison. Never said a word, never pulled strings, never asked for mercy. The law was the law. The code was the code. That's not coldness. That's integrity so pure it cuts like a blade. Over 32 years as a deputy marshal, Bass Reeves made over 3,000 arrests, killed 14 men. Every killing justified, every shot measured, every decision clean. He never killed for sport, never drew first unless drawn on, never took a life he didn't have to take. When forced to kill, he did it quick, clean, professional. And he'd read over the body, say a prayer, move on to the next warrant. He served warrants in weather that would break most men, rode through blizzards, crossed flooded rivers, tracked outlaws through territory so rough it didn't have names. Once he was shot in the leg during a gunfight. Dug the bullet out with his knife, bandaged the wound with his shirt, finished tracking his man. Another time, he was pursuing a wanted killer through the Chickasaw Nation. 3 days without food. His horse went lame. He continued on foot, caught his man at a trading post 50 miles later. No backup, no radio, no extraction plan, just the mission and the will to complete it. He retired in 1907 when Oklahoma became a state. 44 years of service, thousands of miles in the saddle, countless nights sleeping rough under stars that don't care about your color or your cause. He died in 1910, buried in Muskogee, Oklahoma. The outlaws he'd hunted came to his funeral, paid their respects, because even on opposite sides of the law, they recognized something rare, something that doesn't come along often. A man who meant what he said, did what he promised, held the line when the line was all that stood between civilization and chaos. See, Bass Reeves didn't read Marcus Aurelius, probably never heard the name Epictetus, but he lived their teachings better than most philosophy professors. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Bass Reeves couldn't control the racism that made every job twice as hard, couldn't control the outlaws who shot at him, couldn't control the system that barely acknowledged his existence, but he controlled his response, his discipline, his adherence to the code. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Every day, Bass Reeves dealt with men who'd given up on law, on order, on the idea that right and wrong meant something. He could have become like them, could have decided that in a lawless place, law was meaningless. Instead, he became the law. Not through cruelty, through consistency. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Bass Reeves didn't debate virtue, didn't lecture about justice. He rode out in the morning and brought it back at night, one warrant at a time. If it is endurable, endure it. If it is not, stop complaining. 32 years in the saddle. 32 years of sleeping rough, eating cold beans, tracking killers through country that would break most men in half. He endured because endurance was the job, and the job was all that mattered. He didn't write about Stoicism. He was Stoicism, in motion, under pressure, tested daily by men with guns and nothing to lose. And he never broke. Studied operators across timelines, soldiers who held impossible positions, cops who walked beats that would terrorize most people, agents who worked alone in places where backup was a fantasy. Bass Reeves belongs in that company, not because of his gun skills, not because of his arrest record, because of his mind. He understood something most people never learn. Discipline isn't about what you do when you're watched. It's about what you do when you're alone, when no one's keeping score, when the only judge is your own conscience. He operated in a world where black lives were expendable, where his badge was a target more than a shield, where every arrest could be his last. And he never let it break him, never let it change him, never let it make him less than what he'd chosen to be. I've read his arrest records, talked to historians who studied his methods, walked some of the same trails he rode. What strikes me isn't the legend, it's the consistency, day after day, year after year, warrant after warrant, the same discipline, the same precision, the same unwavering commitment to the code. He could have quit 1,000 times, could have found easier work, safer work, work that didn't require him to risk his life for people who barely acknowledged his humanity. But he didn't quit, because quitting wasn't in the code, and the code was all he had, all he needed. Built something out there in Indian territory, not monuments, not fame, something harder to build and easier to destroy. Trust. The kind of trust that made outlaws surrender without a fight. The kind that made judges sleep easier knowing Bass Reeves was in the field. He proved something that needed proving. That virtue isn't about background, isn't about education, isn't about opportunity. It's about choice, daily choice. The choice to be better than your circumstances, stronger than your obstacles, more disciplined than your enemies. Bass Reeves made that choice every morning for 32 years. And the echoes of that choice are still riding, still holding the line. Bass Reeves didn't write meditations, but he lived them. Every mile in the saddle, every warrant served, every decision made in the space between drawing and firing. He didn't quote the Stoics. He embodied them, in silence, in service, in sacrifice that nobody recorded and most people never knew about. No camera crews, no headline ticker, no book deals or speaking tours. Just a man in the saddle, doing what was right when right was damn near impossible to define, much less enforce. A stoic in spurs and dust, a philosopher with a badge and a Winchester, unbending, unyielding, unbroken. So if this story steadied your aim, if it reminded you that honor doesn't need an audience, that discipline isn't loud, and that real virtue doesn't flinch when the world gets ugly, then carry it. Signal boost. Pass it on. Share it with whoever's riding their own patrol in the dark. We keep these stories alive not for nostalgia, but because in a world hungry for spectacle, restraint is revolution. Bass Reeves was that revolution. One arrest at a time, one choice at a time, one sunrise at a time. And the revolution continues. Every time someone chooses duty over comfort, order over chaos, the code over the easy way out. This was File 7, the Lawman's quiet code. Bass Reeves, deputy, warrior, stoic. Next time, we track another soul who stood their ground when surrender would have been easier. This is Gage, Cole Braddock, signing off from the edge of the archive. Keep your oath, hold the line, and never mistake silence for surrender. Always.